inexpensive Honda eBay turbo kits. We put them to the test. In this video, we find out how well these low-buck eBay Civic turbo kits work. We installed a turbo kit from CX Racing on a Civic EX. You know, single cam VTEC D series, EX, SI, you get the picture. So the question was, do they work? The next question is, if they do work, how well do they work? And the final question is, if they work well, what did it take to get them to work well? You know, the extra stuff besides the turbo kit, things like fuel system and tuning. So let's find out, do they work? How well do they work? And what did it take? Before we get to the test, that CX Racing turbo kit on our Civic EX, let's ask the hard question. Bolt-ons or boost? You see, we've got a Honda. There's a lot of aftermarket support. Why not go the bolt-on route? I mean, there's a ton of stuff available. You got air intakes, catback exhaust, headers. If you want to go even further, how about a camshaft or ported heads? I mean, it's a Honda. There's a ton of stuff available. The problem is, all of those bolt-ons don't even come close to the power gains you get with a simple turbo kit. That's right, with a turbo kit, you can increase the power output by 50, 60, 70%. Heck, it's even possible to double or triple the power output of any Honda motor with a turbo kit. Those kind of gains you won't get from just bolt-ons. Now, the bolt-ons will help with the turbo kit, but the reality is they're probably not necessary. You can get huge gains, but as we'll see, there are other considerations. It's not just boost. There's other things you need to do, so let's check it out. Before we get to the test of our low-buck turbo kit, I want to know what you guys want to see. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell, but most importantly, comment. Let me know what kind of Honda content you guys want to see. I mean, I've tested everything. Turbos, blowers, nitrous, strokers, you name it, I've tested it all. So I need to know what you guys want to see. If you haven't already, check out the Honda stuff that's already up. I ran a B16A with a Jackson Racing supercharger, a Vortex supercharger, and a turbo. Same boost, same airfill, same timing. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's right here. How about a 227 mile an hour Honda Civic? For the longest time, it was the world's fastest Honda Civic. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's right here. But make sure to comment, let me know what you want to see. Let's get to our test. To get things started, we installed this D Series EX Civic up on the dyno with a single cam VTEC motor and ran it with the CX Racing turbo kit. Now, the turbo kit featured the turbo, exhaust manifold, wastegate, intercooler piping, and a downpipe, so basically it was kind of complete. Now, the CX Racing kit came with a T3 T04E turbo, and it was sized pretty well for the single cam VTEC motor. It had enough compressor to make some decent power. We will get up to nearly 300 horsepower at the tire on this thing, so it was good power. It also had the hot side size so that it would produce good power. I'll go ahead and put the turbo specs up here so you guys can find out what size the turbo was. And we, like I said, we made good power and it had good response, which is important for a 1.6 liter single cam motor out on the street. Now, it also included an air-to-air intercooler and all the plumbing associated to hook that thing up. We made sure to have a fan in front of this thing so that we had good cooling during the testing. Now, it's also important to note that this particular motor had a camshaft upgrade already in it. It had a small Crowler cam in it, and it made a little bit more power than stock. As a matter of fact, it made about 130 to 135 at a tire, naturally aspirated. So this is the power output of our single cam VTEC with the CX Racing turbo kit on it. And this is run at about 9.5 pounds. It was run through an aftermarket catback setup with no cat and the downpipe supplied with the turbo kit, which is a 3-inch downpipe. We ran the wastegate supplied with the turbo kit, and we just ran it basically on the spring. And on the spring with no controller hooked up, it produced a peak of 9.5 pounds. And equipped as such, it produced 220 horsepower and 194 foot-pounds of torque. So it made good power and good torque. Those guys that have run VTEC motors before will notice that our VTEC actuation point here at about 4,800 RPM was probably a tad on the late side because we got a big jump in power after the VTEC engagement. So we could have engaged that a little bit sooner. But this combination worked well. Picked up a lot of power per pound of boost.
the combination worked good. And this is a fun little car. We drove this thing out on the street at this power level, and it worked really well. Now, also, we made sure to upgrade the injectors and the fuel pump before doing this, because if you try to do this on the stock fuel pump, it just won't work. If you try to do it with the stock injectors, it obviously is not going to work either. Now, you need to make sure we put a set of 440 injectors in here and a 255 liter in the tank pump. So that's a good combination for street use. And we dialed everything in with a Chrome, EFI management system, so that we could go in and dial in the air, fuel, and timing. And Ernie from West Tech, when he was back there, did all the tuning on this thing. It worked out real good. It's a good little turbo kit, good setup for that single cam VTEC, and it made good power. We produced 220 horsepower at the tire, which is a good combination. Now let's take a look and see what happened when we up the boost, because you never just run 9 pounds.
Before we get to the power gains offered by increasing the boost pressure on our low buck turbo kit from CX Racing, let's take a look at the boost curves. Now, if we take a look, we started off at 9.5 pounds, then raised it to 11 pounds, 12.2, 12.7, and then finally up to 14.5 pounds. Now, it's important to note, take a look at how smooth and flat the curves are. This is really impressive given the fact that we used a manual wastegate controller, which is basically just a bleed valve that tricks the boost signal to the wastegate. So the wastegate thinks that there's less boost going to it, so it stays closed for a longer period of time and allows a higher boost pressure to be raised. Normally with a manual controller, you can get fluctuations in the boost curve. That's why we use an electronic controller to keep it nice and flat, but in this instance, it worked out great. Adjust the boost controller valve, more boost, and more power. So now let's take a look at the power gains offered by the change in boost pressure. We can take a look at the power gains associated with each one of these boost levels, starting off at 9.5 pounds and ending with 14.5 pounds. But remember, we hadn't reached the limit of the turbo. There was plenty left.
After running our low buck Civic turbo kit from CX Racing, we decided to do what everybody else that has a turbo kit on a Civic, or really any car does. We turned up the boost. So at 9.5 pounds, this thing made 220 horsepower at the tire, which was a good combination. But we decided to increase the boost, so we put a manual wastegate controller on, simple bleed valve. Then cranked it up to 11 pounds. That did good. 236 horsepower. Got some good gains. Basically good gains everywhere, but again, we have our VTEC actuation point. We could have adjusted that and picked up a little bit of power there in the middle. So here's 12.2 pounds, up over 250 at the tire. Turned it up another turn, basically another half pound. 262 horsepower. Turned it up again. 14.5 pounds. Where we're making 280 horsepower at the tire. And you see, again, a little adjustment there in the VTEC actuation point. But it's here where we started to get into a problem with the clutch. Now this thing had basically kind of a stage 1 clutch in it. And it started to get into a slipping problem, so we needed actually more clutch. But that's kind of a good situation to be in. If you need more clutch because you're making more power, that means you're doing something right. We're also revving this thing out past 7,000 RPM, even though the peak power was happening at about 6,400. So, if you're revving it out there, it feels good, more RPM. And as long as you can get the most average power in the RPM you're running it, you just don't want to over rev it and hurt the motor. But this is a ton of power. I mean, this is 280 at the tire, so we'd more than doubled the power output of that motor, even though it already had a cam in it. Good combination. Obviously, these low buck turbo kits kind of work on these Civic. As long as you have enough fuel and the right tuning, they work great. Let's get to our conclusion.
Okay guys, what'd you think about the test on our Civic turbo kit? The low buck stuff from CX Racing. Personally, I thought it worked well. Now the complete kit bolted into the car, everything fit, and everything worked. Now there are other ways to do it. You can piecemeal it. There are lots of exhaust manifolds and turbos and intercooler and piping kits available. You can grab them all individually and put them together. Personally, I like the fact that this kit came complete and it was designed to fit in that chassis and work with that engine family. It worked well, it fit, and it also made power. But as we saw, it was important that we had the other components. I know we bought a complete kit, but it didn't include the fuel system. So we had to upgrade the injectors, the fuel pump, and we had to have tuning. Now lucky for Civic owners, there's stuff like Honda and Chrome available, so you can go in and dial in the air, fuel, and timing, which is critical on a turbo application. Back in the day, we used FMUs and retarded the timing. Naturally, it didn't work as well, but we were able to make boost. Now we've got everything we need to make a ton of power, even from the Civic motor. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. As I told you, make sure to comment, let me know what you want to see. Thanks for watching.